Maybe when you think about Christianity, you think of this.
On the third day, God created the Remington bolt-action rifle so that man could fight the dinosaurs and the homosexual.
Or perhaps you think of this. That was kind of actually funny, right? Or maybe you even think of something like,
I blow the wind of God on you. You are destroyed for.
I get it. But Christianity, it's about the inner transformation of a person. Hi guys, welcome or welcome back to my channel. I'm so happy that you joined me again today. And if this is your first time here, welcome. Yes, you have entered into the bastion of critical thinking, critical analysis, critical thoughts. Critical. We just are critical and we dive into critical thoughts here. I wanted to create a space where we can critically think through things in a world where that isn't always welcome, right? And there isn't a lot of that going on a lot of times because we are inundated with how we should think. We're inundated in algorithmic produced thought, so much so that we are void of our own thoughts. And so I wanted to create a space where we can cultivate good thinking, right? So with that in mind, you have entered into the series I like to call Critique and Reform. And what that basically means is we're going to go into different parts of popular culture and find critiques of it and be able to substantively offer critiques of it and also contribute potential places of reform that could be brought to that space as well. Because what I don't ever want to do is critique so much and be hating from outside the club, right? But I want to be able to go into these spaces and offer thoughts that I know can be useful, but also offer specific ways that we can help to evolve that space and reform that space. And if you're wondering, well, how do I have the credentials to be able to do something like this? Well, glad you asked. I am a social scientist. I'm a therapist by trade. I am a seminarian, and also I am a student of culture, right? And I'm a student of history, and I'm an avid reader. And I'm a person who particularly loved popular culture and the things that happened within popular culture and doing analysis of them. And then I took notice of some of the ills within it. And I was like, you know what? It's probably best not to just critique it and be angry at it, but rather go into those spaces, infiltrate those spaces, have conversation about those spaces with people who also are avid lovers of it, and find ways that we can collectively reform it so that we're not just consumers of it, but rather contributors of what's happening and what's popular within our cultural zeitgeist. So with that in mind, I'm excited that you've joined me on this journey, and let's hop right into the video. So the faction of popular culture that we'll be hopping into today is Christianity. And I know you're probably thinking, well, Raven, how does Christianity in any way coincide with popular culture, right? Fret not, little one. I hear you and I hear your confusion. But remember, we're here to critically think. So be prepared to open up your thoughts and confront some of your biases, and I'll help you to see the correlation in just a moment. I chose Christianity as something to hop into, one, because like I mentioned earlier, I'm a seminarian, right? I'm a student in divinity school presently. I'm in my second year. I've read a ton of books lately about the resurgence of faith systems within culture, more particularly Christianity, and how much there has been a mass exodus, but now also a resurgence of people entering back into the faith. Still pales in comparison to the amount of people that are leaving, but there is somewhat of a resurgence happening. And so it piqued my interest because I was like, well, wait, why is that the case? Why is there a resurgence? But also, why was there a mass exodus to begin with? And then we can go into all of the reasons why there was, right? I actually read a great book, and I'll pin it here, that talked about the great de-churching. It talked about how there has been a mass exodus and why there is. And some of the reasons they listed were people's fatigue of it, people's frustration with how much the church, especially Western church, was tethered to a lot of evangelical ideals, and how we know historically evangelical ideals sometimes are too close to things like racism, right? And things like bigotry and nationalism in a way that bred imperialism. And people were turned off to things like that, understandably so. And so many of people's exit of the church had a lot to do with some political implications that the church started to steep too far into, and they just weren't comfortable with that anymore. And then some of it just had a lot to do with how much more secular our society has become, and how much more we just feel church became a part of a weekly routine as opposed to a personal connection with a faith system that we felt had utility to our daily lives. And the less you feel that it has real use in your life, the less you feel like you need it, right? And it goes into a ton of other arguments. The book is really, really good. I suggest you read it. It is from a white Western perspective. And so keep that in mind, because there were some places where I'm like, well, as a Black Christian who grew up in Black Christianity or Black church, some of the critiques and some of their conclusions felt really one-sided, in that, not one-sided in that they were dismissive or racist in any way, but one-sided in that they talked a lot about wealth in the church and how much churches are so wealthy and they shun people who come from lesser backgrounds or more marginal backgrounds. And the thing is, as I read it, I'm like, yeah, I can imagine that being true for a lot of wealthier white churches. But I was like, baby, that is not my experience growing up in Black church with a lot of poverty, right? Black inner city church at that. And so there were some marginal places where it's different. But overall, the book was really comprehensive and really good. Anyhow, all that to say, it gave some really good analysis of why there has been a mass exodus of the church and some of the things that we can do to kind of rectify it. So I definitely suggest going to read that, because now I realize that Christianity gets a bad rap. I'm gonna keep it honest. Popular culture has not been kind to Christianity, and I don't like that. It's so transformative. It's a faith system that is unlike any other. And I say that because Christianity, it forces you to go inward, right? And it's concerned not about this regimen of moral things that you should do on a daily basis, or this regimen of things of boxes that you should check so that you can be as close to God as possible. It's not about rigidity. It's about Jesus coming to transform our nature. So it's not necessarily concerned about the fact that you may have sinned, but rather what caused you to sin in the first place, right? And it talks about the nature, the heart of a man, the heart of a woman, the heart of a human being, as opposed to the specific things that you do or don't do. And I know with a lot of other world religions, they focus solely on behaviors and external practice of morals and ethics, as opposed to Christianity. It focuses on your soul, and it focuses on the core of the person. I think it's so many transformative elements to Christianity that we do a disservice to, because we go straight to critiques of it, because that's what the popular culture narrative wants us to do, right? Or it's feeding us to do. And don't get me wrong, some of the critiques that Christianity has gotten are obviously born out of their own behavior and their own realities, things that they've created. So I don't want to be dismissive about that fact. But what we also can't do is completely dismiss it, because we do ourselves a disservice. When we critique a faith system based solely off of anecdotal evidence, maybe you've had like some negative experiences as an individual, or maybe you've heard negative experiences that other people have had, and so you write it off altogether. It's one, intellectually lazy, and then it's two, it really diminishes in your own life the power and the transformative things that can take place if you were to really contend with the truths of this faith system and with some of the benefits of this faith system. I wanted to create a space where we can offer some countering narratives, because I think the narrative that has been pushed about Christianity is far too one-dimensional and frankly unfair. But not only just unfair to Christianity, because let's be clear, it can absolutely withstand the critiques. Because when something is true, right? When something is rooted and grounded in foundational authenticity, the whims of the culture or contemporary critiques can do nothing to it long term. However, it does a disservice to you, the person, the human who needs to tether yourself to something existential, to something divine, something larger than oneself. We are nothing without or disconnected from our spiritual beings. We're nothing without it. All we are fleeting beings trying to make meanings out of what can feel like a meaningless whole. You live, you do some stuff, you work, you die. Life can feel real meaningless and purposeless without being tethered to something larger than oneself. We do ourselves a disservice when we dismiss them based solely off of uncomfortable experiences. I think that's limited, and I think that's short-sighted. So the first thing that I want to talk through is the thing that we're probably all familiar with hearing. All Christians are hypocrites, and so that's why I don't go or delve into Christianity. And you know what I say to that? Yeah, you're probably right. Cue all of the people that are absolutely about to be angry with me for saying that. But yeah, you're probably right. As a matter of fact, I know you're right. And you know why I know that? Because we are born into sin and shaped in iniquity. And what that means is from the time that Adam and Eve rebelled against God in the Garden of Eden, the reality is we were thrust into a sin nature that we have no control over. So whether or not I dotted every I and crossed every T, or never did behaviors that are reflective of sin, whether or not that's true, because of that original sin, right? That original rebellion against God, I'll always, according to biblical truth, I'll always be a victim of the sin nature. And what does hypocrite mean? Hypocrite, according to the Britannica Dictionary, a person who claims or pretends to have certain beliefs about what is right, but who behaves in a way that disagrees with those beliefs. Yep, that's about every Christian, but not because Christians are particularly bad. You find me a Muslim or a Jew or a Buddhist or a Hindu who follows the letter of their sacred text to the T. You find me one, you won't. And I'll just save you the journey. You won't. But you know why though? Because we are flawed at our core. And the reason we're flawed at our core is because of that original sin. If you don't know the story of the Bible, Adam and Eve lived in the Garden of Eden, a perfect place, a place free and void of sin. Then they were tempted by the evil one, because in the cosmos, there always has to exist an evil energy and a good energy, because that's how you keep order in the universe. The universe is a deeply intelligent space because it was made by an intelligent creator. It was created by an intelligent creator. So yeah, there was always free will within the cosmos, because love wouldn't be able to exist without the concept of a free will. I want that to really resonate with you. Love is a choice. It's not love if the person doesn't choose you. And so for there to be concepts of love and hate, there has to always be a good energy and a bad energy, so to speak. I'm saying them in really elementary terms because I want to make sure that you can digest this. There was a good and evil in the cosmos. And of course, in this perfect place, that there was an evil that existed, this alternative in the cosmos that tempted Adam and Eve, or tempted Eve. Eve fell short, and she also went to Adam, and they both fell short and essentially rebelled against God and disobeyed God. Okay. And then from that point on, if you don't know this story, I just want to make sure you're clear. From that point on, sin entered into the world. And then as a result of that, we are descendants of that. We're all born as victims to this truth and to this reality. Now, what does that have to do with hypocrites and why you don't engage with church and Christianity because of hypocrites? Well, we're all hypocrites because whether or not, again, I do all things right, I'll still be victim of this nature, because that's what I was born into, because every single thing in the earth realm is corrupted by sin. Everything, every single thing. And there'll never be a day until Jesus returns, there'll never be a day where we won't be corrupted by sin nature. And so I'll never be able to live up to the perfection, the divine nature, the divine calling, the glorified body that I was originally designed to be. I'll never be able to do that because of that original sin. So yeah, everybody is a hypocrite. We won't be able to arrive to perfection. Now, that's not to excuse away the real problems that hypocritical behavior and the real ills that bad behaviors from people who are supposed to be representative of the body of Christ and the kingdom of God. That's not to dismiss bad behaviors from those people. I say this though in an effort to shift our expectations. The expectation isn't to find spaces or places or people that don't fall victim to sin, because that's impossible. The expectation isn't to find perfection. And I know how we get that expectation. I want to give credence to people's critique of Christianity and people who are blatantly hypocritical. I understand how you arrive to that place, because we all have that longing for the divine and to tap into something bigger and beautiful and more opulent than ourselves and our own monotony in our own lives. And so when we go to church spaces or religious spaces in general, we're looking for meaning. Life can feel real monotonous and boring and meaningless and sad and traumatic and scary. It can get really dark sometimes. We go to church spaces, we go to Christian spaces and faith spaces to look for freedom from that, to look for the exception to that. And when we can't find it, it can be disappointing. It can really deter you from belief that it's even possible to find a space like that where you can be free from the ills and ailments that culture thrusts upon to us, right? It's like, oh no, I get all this negativity and judgment and uncomfortability and hypocriticalness in secular spaces. I don't want to also face that in sacred spaces too. So I get people's critique and assertion that, you know what, all Christians are hypocrites, so what's the point? But the point is, hun, that's never what Jesus even asserted that he came here for. Jesus came again to save us from the reasons why we sin and not from particular behaviors. Jesus didn't come to free you from the specifics of it, but rather to transform your core, to transform the things within you that compel you to sin in the first place. The fact that you get angry, let's say somebody cuts you off in the street and then you get angry and then you're about to cuss and you get mad, like in that moment, that instant anger that you feel, that's sin. Not because you're necessarily this horrible person and that anger specifically is a sin, or cussing out the person in the road is a sin, but the compelling to anger before even the person that cuts you off, the fact that it came out so naturally, that's because internally we are corrupted by the wolves of sin. That's what Jesus came for. But my response to that first one is, yeah, hun, we are all hypocrites. And thankfully, there is a Savior that came to save us and supernaturally transform my heart so that I don't have to be a slave to that. So my thought is, yes, we are. But that's why I don't do this for them. I'm not looking to anything temporary, but I'm so grateful and thanks be to God that I pray to and worship and adore a perfect God who isn't hypocritical and who has given me the blueprint for how best to conduct this Christian life. Okay? Alrighty. Now, number 2, Christians are ignorant and uneducated. Full transparency, I used to struggle with this one myself because I grew up in a Christian space where there was a lot of uneducation around Christianity. And I don't even just mean uneducated in the secular sense, although that's true as well, but I even mean uneducated about what the Bible actually says. And I was taught a lot of things that weren't necessarily right about the Bible. And it's at no fault of the people who raised me or who brought me up in it, but rather history just, if you know anything about Black history specifically, because I grew up in a Black church, majority of Black people couldn't read. It was illegal for them to read, let's be clear. And so the iteration of Christianity that so many Black people come from was one that was undereducated, and it was a lot of word of mouth. So we hear on top of it, there was something called the slave Bible. So it was a watered down, a half-truth gospel, a gospel rooted in oppression, a gospel rooted in oppression. It was a gospel rooted in subjugation, right? That was the gospel that was presented to us, not the one that's true. I want to be clear about that. Okay, so of course, the iteration of the gospel that so many Black people received was a half-baked one, right? And one that further perpetuated our oppressive nature and our oppressive position within our society. The ramifications and the implications of that are definitely still permeating even today, which is why me, a 30-year-old, can honestly acknowledge that, yeah, I came up in a really, really truncated gospel, one that was limited in its truths and limited in how it presented the real salvific power of the gospel and what that even means. I struggled to come to terms with how much the gospel and Jesus's work on the cross was enough. I literally just now, when I got to seminary, I say this often, I'm just now coming to the understanding that, like, oh no, I really don't have to do anything. I don't have to do a good deed. I don't have to be good enough. I don't have to perform good enough. All I have to do is accept Jesus into my heart and fall in love with Jesus and the work that he did on the cross and how he arose from the dead and is now seated at the right hand of the Father. That's what I have to tether myself to so that it can show up and permeate my life and my lifestyle. But prior to this time, I was woefully uneducated about the truths of the gospel and what it all meant. I was just like so many other people, God bless their hearts, who thought, It's about not sinning. It's about not drinking. And it's about, looking like a Christian. It ain't even really about what's in your heart. It's about, long as you look like a Christian to the old saints and they don't judge you and they don't think anything negative of you, then that's how you show that you're a Christian. Woefully undereducated. And so you add a woefully uneducated spiritually faction of people, and also woefully under an uneducated faction of people as far as secular school goes. That can be a really, really dangerous place. And it can yield it yielded, at least in my personal experience and what I've seen even anecdotally throughout my time in churches, it's yielded a lot of people who turn Christianity into this euphoric place, or this place of utopia that they go to escape from the woes of the world, right? It's turned into this thing that makes you feel good and it gives you the frilly feelings so that you can just, even for a moment, dismiss and be removed from the negative things that you go through in your own life. So dismissing you of personal responsibility, dismissing you of accountability, because the biggest thing that you have to focus on is just that good feeling, even for a moment, away from all the negative parts about your life. So yeah, I get this critique. However, what is also true is that the message of the gospel is one of liberation, and it's one of freedom, and it's one of deep, deep resilience. One that most people that don't have a faith system find it difficult to tap into. They find it difficult to tap into a hope system because their lives, when you're not tapped into something larger, more existential than yourself, your life is centered around what you can see, feel, and touch. Now, if all you can see, feel, and touch is the things around you, and the things around you are terrible and they don't feel good and they're actually really bad for you in that moment in your life, that can be a really dangerous place to be stuck into. And so I hear people's critiques about Christianity and how it's the religion of Anglo-Saxons, right? And it was given to Black people or people in general by Anglo-Saxons. It leaves them ignorant. I hear that critique. I have some other thoughts towards it, but we'll address that in another video. I hear it though, but that's woefully ignorant, because it's also been the religion that has sustained, built up, and helped people. And that can't be dismissed because you're angry about the ways that it evolved. I think we do ourselves such a disservice, the previous generations before us a disservice, particularly Black Christians, when we relegate them to dumb, ignorant people who are overtaken by the narrative of white Christianity. And I'm not just relegating this video to how Black people interpret Christianity, but I think this was such an important one to highlight, because I know so many factions of religious people in the minority say this often, and this is such a common trope of Christianity, that it is a colonizer's religion and one that white people thrust onto the world and spread into the world. That's just factually inaccurate, and again, we'd have to do a whole other video to debunk the inaccuracies in that. But also, it's so dismissive and degrading and disrespectful to the people that really gleaned powerful truths from it and were able to use it as a means of resilience and a place of hope. And not only that, but the ways it's transformed. So yeah, was it presented in some really disgusting, horrific ways that did some real damage to Black communities and to the world at large? Absolutely, there's no denying that. But what there's also no denying of, and this kind of gets us into point 3, is that Christianity has also contributed immensely to the world and to the progression of the world. And to act as though it hasn't is to be woefully ignorant of history, number one, and to really continue to perpetuate a hedonist and a hedonism that is so dangerous to humanity. Because trying to assert that organized religion, or Christianity in particular, is so negative and harmful to the world and it's only done harm and no good, is to dismiss some of the real things that Christianity has actually done in the world, like the bulk of hospitals, the bulk of orphanages, the bulk of charitable systems in general, even though some of them, many of them are flawed, but in general have contributed to the evolution of the world, and most of them are Christian based, because Christian ethics, the core of Christianity, the love of neighbor, love of the other over yourself, meekness, humility, all of those things are tenets and core values in the Christian faith that you can't dismiss. And not only can't you dismiss them, but they're interwoven into the core of our society. And most people don't even know that or acknowledge that because they're so interwoven in our society. It's not coincidental that predominantly Christian nations are thriving. There are some elements of colonization, cultural pillaging that took place to get to that space for Christian nations to thrive as opposed to others. However, even though that is true, what is also true, those Christian values and Christian morals and Christian ethics play a major part in the quality of society. And even if, because I know oftentimes people say the four founders of our country were Christian, and so that's why this country, America, I mean, is so great. Actually, that's not kind of true, right? Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, at best, they were deists, right? They believed in deism, but to say that they were Christian, it's hard to say that. However, that Christian ethic was interwoven in their perspective, which is why we did develop a country that is built off of freedom and the pursuit of happiness for the individual. I recognize that it was the most hypocritical people on the planet, right? Because on one end, they were professing freedom and liberation for human beings while also subjugating and oppressing and literally enslaving and raping another faction of human beings. Of course, disgusting, racist, horrible human beings. But let's just stay focused on not necessarily the outcomes, but rather the core values that the faith professes and how those core values laid the groundwork for emancipation from slavery that this country eventually started to work towards, and also freedom in general, right? Freedom and the pursuit of happiness for the individual and how every individual life has value. Those are Christian ethics. And so although the founding fathers were deists and deeply racist and disgusting human beings, their ideas that precipitated this country or that began this country are birthed from Christian ethics. And that can't be dismissed because two things can be true at once, right? And we can walk and chew gum at the same time. So all that to say, we shouldn't just dismiss it as white colonization because it's more than that. And we are beneficiaries of some of the beautiful parts of Christianity that we don't even recognize because our society is so accustomed to just dismissing it as white people stuff that's racist and that caused so many ills in the world. That's partially true. But if you don't do the work of understanding how the other side of this is true, you do yourself a disservice to the beauties of it and what it actually has contributed to the world. Got it? Okay? Now, 3, we don't need organized religion. Ugh, I hear this one so much and it's so annoying to me. And I'll tell you why. How arrogant of us to think that the very thing that has helped to sustain the world and helped to organize the world is the thing that we dismiss. But I want to be clear, and this is the part where we'll really have to get into history just for a moment, so that way we're just not talking from anecdotal thought, but rather things of history that kind of help shape and define where we are today. So the reason we've come to this thought, we don't really need organized religion in modern society, that we got there from the Enlightenment era. When Isaac Newton and John Locke all came up with these ideas that, oh, actually, no, we don't need religion. And they did essentially like a backlash to the Catholic Church that was acting as an oppressive figure within European society, right? They were absolutely being dictatorial and making them pay for their sins. All manner of corruption existed within the church. And then the government was on the payroll of the church, right? So it was all kind of one and the same. It was a theocracy, essentially. And people lived their lives based off of what the faith system said, and they were kind of interchangeable. So church was almost a mandated thing, and going to church and be a part of a religious system was mandated, making it void of relationship, void of any authenticity, but rather a basic part of the human experience and one that inflicted a lot of oppression onto the people. Okay, why is that relevant? Well, the Enlightenment era came as a backlash to that time when the Catholics were being extremely oppressive to the people. And so that you have these philosophers and these physicists come and say, you know what, actually, we don't really need to be organized in that way. We can just be compelled by these universal truths that compel us to goodness and compel us to order and equality within a society without having to put specific rules and regulations from this big ideal God that we've created in our minds. We can just come together as community for the sake of continuation of a race of people, right? Or for continuation of humans. And so this era, to be clear, was profound, right? And it helped to progress and propel our culture and our societies forward. And it's responsible for why we are so organized in modern society anyway. We are so organized in thought, and we are able to have functioning governments that see to it that our countries continue and that we are able to coexist and cohabitate peacefully, relatively speaking. And so that's important. A great amount of so many of the present day things that we are so accustomed to and that feel like such second nature to us are a result of the Enlightenment era. Okay, what does all this history have to do with why we actually do need organized religion and why Christianity is so important? This era, though it contributed so many profound things that have evolved the world, it's also relegated us to thinking that we can think through everything and we can rationalize and reason our way through everything. So much so that we've gotten lost in hedonism, thinking that we have enough knowledge and capacity to, one, handle the woes and ills of what it is to be human flesh, right? Have you ever wondered why we're so capable of such magnanimous, amazing capacity, right? Able to heal diseases and come up with sciences and mechanisms to evolve and advance our world, while also, like, the human mind is so amazingly gifted and sharp and witty and talented and funny and charismatic and so amazing, while also being such slaves to malevolence and destruction and capable of such barbaric behaviors. Have you ever wondered why that is? It's because we're sinful at our core. And because of that, we need something larger than ourselves to help us to make meaning of it. And rationale and reason just won't cut it. Not because they're void, because I know oftentimes Christians, going back to number two, Christians get a bad rap of dismissing some of the scientific evolution that we've been able to make in our society, or make in a society, because of human reason and human capacity. And I think we do ourselves a disservice when we do that. However, to act like they can't coexist, or act like one is not needed, or faith isn't needed because you have human capacity and human reason, that's dumb. That's really dumb. And not only is it dumb, it's dangerous, because we can't be left to our own devices, because we're created. We don't create, we're created. And so to the extent that our human capacity has been able to evolve the world, it's only through the lens of what a masterful creation we are, being masterfully and meticulously crafted by an intelligent creator, by intelligent design. And you can be dismissive of that all you want to, because I understand the ills of history, or what people who have been representatives of Christianity has done within a society to make you dismissive of it, but that doesn't dismiss the realities of human nature. Because truthfully, guys, some things will just always remain true. And organized religion, it provides community. It provides meaning in a world that often feels void of meaning. It provides answers in a world that often is struggling to find them. And you can say all day long that's the ignorant route to take. So you'd rather relegate yourself to the abyss, darkness, loneliness, isolation, for the sake of feeling like you have the answers. What the era of rationale and reason draws into is trying to reason our way through everything. Things that are innate to human nature, we try and create rationale and reason behind it. And sometimes intrinsic things don't have reason. They just are, because our body needs it. So we've removed ourselves from community largely. We've removed ourselves from family systems largely. We've removed ourselves from the idea that we need other people. Maybe not intentionally have we done this, but we've advanced our society so much so that we've centered our society, Western specifically, we've centered our societies around isolationism and individualism as a result of these eras of evolution that we took. And now we're seeing the ramifications of that. People are lonely. Suicide rates are up. People are depressed, deeply depressed. Nihilism is the theme of the day. But it's because we've removed ourselves of some of the things that are so intrinsically true about what it is to be human, which is the need for community, which is the need for love and an aspiration and something higher than ourselves that isn't work related, that isn't professional related. We've removed ourselves from the truth of what it is to be spiritual beings. There is a spiritual faction to who we are. And so long as we ignore that for the sake of trying to be smarter or trying to be more evolved and rational and reasonable, to the extent that we dismiss things that are so intrinsic to our nature, will deplete. We need God through and through, hands down. We need something larger than ourselves to sustain the woes of this earth, because sin entered into it, and it's a dangerous place to be without recognition and acknowledgement that we are creatures made by a masterful creator. So we don't have the blueprint for the core of who we are. We can navigate this space and we can try our best, because we are made with such an intelligent design. We can try our best to make it make sense and create order where there is chaos. But make no mistake about it, we need adherence to something bigger than ourselves, because we aren't capable of doing this alone. So, what is the core message of this video? Christianity gets a bad rap. It really does. And pop cultural narratives have been really harsh on Christianity, understandably so, right? I get it. And Christianity provides a space of love, and it's about the inner transformation of a person. It's not about the things you do or don't do, but it's about a basic recognition that we are not sufficient enough. As beautifully as we are made and as wonderfully designed as we aren't sufficient enough to save ourselves from the wretched core of who we are. You've tried everything else, you've subscribed to everything else, but nothing gave you freedom from the truths of the evils of the world, because there is no escape of it. But also, we have freedom from it, and a freedom that's everlasting and eternal, and that gives us access to an everlasting eternal space, free from the ills and the evils of this world. And you need that. If you've been depressed, if you've been steeped in nihilism, I encourage you today, get to know Jesus. And what does that look like? Start with the Bible. If you don't understand it necessarily, start with basics Bible studies. Start in the book of Romans, the book of John, actually. I suggest the book of John. That's my favorite. Because he talks about the person of Jesus, the man of Jesus, and the fact that he came as an embodied man so that we can have a blueprint for what it is to be a Christian and how it is that we should conduct and live our lives. He made himself into flesh so that he can sacrifice himself for the sake of our sins and pardon us and free us of eternal guilt and damnation. So right now, as we're closing this video, I want you to free your mind of all of the preconceived thoughts that you may have come to this video about Christianity with, and just reckon with the fact and the idea that Jesus came so that you can be freed from this wretched nature that we've been thrust into because of the original sin. That's it. So that you can be free from eternal damnation and eternal separation from God. You want to know what hell is? Being eternally separated from the divine. All right, guys. That was fun. It was a lot, but it was fun. And I feel like there was still so much more that I could have said, but that's okay, because what we're going to do is I want you to drop down in the comments and I want you to tell me, what are some of the myths or things that you feel like should be debunked, or at least talked through more? Because sometimes, like today, I didn't really debunk some. I just kind of leaned in. But I want you to talk to me. What are some things that you feel like Christianity gets a bad rap on, or isn't necessarily true within popular culture about Christianity that we should probably talk through? I want to hear from you, okay? Dad, love you guys so much. Come back and visit me and talk to me about what factions of pop culture do you think I should be delving into and critiquing and offering spaces of reform, or offering thoughts of reform to. All right? Talk to you later, guys. Bye.